Hello and welcome. In this video, I will introduce you to JavaScript. JavaScript is one of the three languages that a web developer must learn. What is JavaScript? JavaScript is a programming language that adds interactivity to your website. The interactivity can be when a button is pressed or when data is entered into a form. It can even be animations. So when you go to a website, anytime you notice some interaction or where you have to press a button, maybe complete a form, those interactions are made possible by JavaScript. When JavaScript is applied to an HTML document, it makes the document dynamic and it adds interactivity to the website. JavaScript was invented by Brendan Eich, who is the co-founder of the Mozilla Corporation, which also is responsible for the Firefox web browser. JavaScript is not Java. There is a completely separate language, programming language called Java. So they are both different in design and other aspects as well. JavaScript is one of the three languages all web developers must learn. The other two languages are HTML and CSS. Another key distinct feature of JavaScript is that JavaScript is case sensitive. So if you declare something with a lowercase and later on try to access that with an uppercase, it will not work because they are two separate things. It treats cases separately. So uppercase and lowercase are two different things in JavaScript. So when you're writing JavaScript code, you need to be careful with your cases. If you're using lowercase to define something, stick to lowercase. So that's it for this introduction to JavaScript. Thank you and bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video, I will show you how to access the Developer Tool Console. What is the Developer Tool Console? The Developer Tool Console is one of the most powerful and free tools available for you to debug your front-end applications. By front-end, I mean things that you can access through the web browser. Debugging basically is a process of trying to find errors that have occurred in your web-based applications. So when there's an error in your code, it's usually referred to as a bug. And the process of trying to detect and fix it is referred to as debugging. The developer tool is a very useful tool, and the console within the developer tool also allows you to write and experiment directly with JavaScript. So you can write some JavaScript inside the console directly and use it to test different things. Almost, if not all, web browsers have a developer tool console, and there are different ways you can access the developer tool console. The most common way is to right click on a web page. If you're on a web page currently, just right click on it and it will give you a context menu. Just select inspect element and that will give you access to the developer tool console. Another way to access it, if you're on a Mac, there is a keyboard shortcut which is Alt, Command and I. That would take you directly into the developer tool console. If you're on the Windows, it will be Control, Shift and I. I have opened up my web browser I'm using Google Chrome, so I've opened up the Google Chrome homepage, and all you need to do, you don't have to be a Google, any website or web browser you open is fine, but I'm using Google Chrome to illustrate how to access the developer tool console. Just right click anywhere, it doesn't matter, and click on inspect. Yours may say inspect element. As long as it's got the word inspect, just click on it, and that will open up the developer area. So this area here is the developer tool areas, and the one we're interested in is the console. So click on the console, and within the console is where you can do different things. For example, you can experiment directly with JavaScript on the console. For example, I could do 5 plus 5 and press enter, and that will give me 10. I can do maybe 10 times 2 and press enter, and that give me 20. So you can experiment with JavaScript directly inside the console, the developer console. You can also troubleshoot errors in your program. If you got a web-based application that is having some errors, or the program is not working as it should, usually you can come to the console and you should see some error messages that will help you or give you a guide as to how to debug or fix the error messages that your application is experiencing. There is no substitute for practice. So in order to get better at anything, you need to practice. The developer tool and the console area here is a very good area for you to experiment with code, especially with JavaScript. So thanks for watching. Bye. Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be showing you where to place JavaScript. There are two main places you can place JavaScript. Internally, that means inside the HTML document. So when you are adding JavaScript internally, you have to use a script tag or script element to add JavaScript to an HTML document internally. You can also add JavaScript externally via an external JavaScript file that has got a .js file extension. So any file externally from the HTML document with a .js file extension is known as the external JavaScript, and you can reference that from your HTML document using a script tag. So let me show you an example of how both works. You can use JavaScript to change the content of an HTML document. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the text here for the heading using JavaScript. So what I'm going to do, just before the closing body tag, I'm going to add a script tag. And the way you do that, you just type in script and put the closing, and it automatically gives you an opening and closing script element. So I'm just going to tab, and in between the script element, I'm going to add some values. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create a variable. Basically is a container that you can use to store values in. So I'm going to create, and the way you do that, you start with the word var. So to define a variable, you type in var, that defines a variable. Then you give the variable a name. I'm going to call my variable my heading. This will be the name of my variable, and I have to give it a value. So the value I'm going to give is going to be document dot query selector which is this here, document dot query selector. This query selector is a method that returns the first element that matches a specified CSS selector in the document. So I need to give it a CSS selector. So single quote, I'll type in H1. H1 is going to be the selector. So this is the name of my variable, and I'm using the document.query selector, which is a method in JavaScript. And what this is saying is that it's going to look for this element, which is an H1 element, which is this one here. And I'm going to change the text. So now that I've defined the variable, all I need to do is call the variable by its name, which is this. And I'm going to add a property, an element property called text content, which is this one here. This will enable me to change the content of this H1 element. So now I need to specify what content I want to change it to. I'm going to change it to say, just make it simple. I'll just say be kind. And that'll be it. And I'll save the document. If I refresh the page, you can see here it has changed the heading. The original heading is this, and I've used JavaScript here to change it. So this is an example of how you would use JavaScript internally inside an HTML document. In order to use JavaScript externally, you need to have an external JavaScript file. I've already got a folder called script, so I'm just going to click on this script folder. I'm going to right click and click on new file, and I'm going to call it myscript.js. Okay, so this is now myscript.js. This will be a JavaScript file. So all I need to do is go to my HTML. I'm just going to grab this. I'm actually going to cut and then paste that inside my script. So this will be my variable, and this will be the content I'm changing it to. So when you are referencing or adding JavaScript to an external file, you don't use a script tag. If you notice here with the HTML, I use script tag, but you don't need that when you are adding JavaScript to an external file. You omit the script. So if I want to reference this JavaScript, I'm going to be referencing it via its name. It's complaining here because I've not done stuff with it. I've declared stuff, but I've not used it. So what I need to do is go back to my HTML and make a reference to that. So in order to reference the JavaScript from my HTML document, I still need the script tag inside the HTML document, and then inside the opening script tag, I need to add the source attribute. The source attribute will tell me where to pick up the file from. All right, and the name of the file is inside my script folder, and the name is called myscript.js. Just by referencing it via its name, it has changed the content of the document. See, the heading has changed. The reason why I've placed the script element near the bottom of the HTML file just before the closing body element is that it enables the HTML to load faster. Because when the page loads, the HTML basically will get loaded by the web browser in the order it appears in the file. If the JavaScript is loaded first and it is supposed to affect the elements below it, it might not work. For example, if I had the script tag above the hello world here, it will not impact on the change I want, because the browser will run the page, the code in the order it was written. So that's one of the reasons of placing the JavaScript right at the bottom, so that the main content of the page loads first before any JavaScript is applied. So that's it for this video. In this video, I showed you how to add JavaScript internally and externally. Thanks for watching, and bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video, I will explain what a syntax is. What is a syntax? In programming language, a syntax basically refers to the vocabulary and grammar that is used to construct a program. Just like with the English language, you'll have to create valid sentences using words and punctuations. In programming, the syntax is a set of rules that guides you in doing that. So these set of rules will guide you as to how you construct your computer programs. Now, every programming language has its own syntax, just like American English is different in some aspects to British English. So the syntax is basically a bunch of rules that enables you to construct a valid format. And this also includes a combination of instructions that you use in putting a program together. So let me show you a basic example of a JavaScript syntax. So this is a JavaScript syntax. It's just a basic one. And in this example here, we've got some key words here. This word var is basically known as a variable. It is used as a storage container. So in this example here, I've got a variable called first number, and I'm using the equals to assign it the value of 7. So what that means is that this value 7 is going to be stored in this container called first number. And here I've got the value 8, which is going to be stored in this container called second number. So this number, first number, second number, are names that I've given to this keyword variable. var is a keyword and part of the JavaScript programming language. So it's a syntax component of the JavaScript programming language. The equals to here is known as an assignment operator. It's also part of the syntax. It is used to assign a value. So wherever you see this equals to sign in a syntax, in a programming syntax, is basically referring to, is using that to assign a value. It's an instruction to assign. So what this is basically saying is that put this value 7 inside this box called first number, put this value 8 inside this box called second number. So this equals to is an assignment operator. It's known as an assignment operator. In some programming language, you don't necessarily have to put a semicolon after you've declared something. In JavaScript, you do. Once you declare a variable in JavaScript, you need to put a semicolon. That is part of the JavaScript syntax. So every programming language has its own way of doing things, which is referred to as a syntax. So the key thing to take away when you see the word syntax is referring to a programming language's vocabulary and grammar. Basically what this means is basically a set of rules of how your programs are constructed. Thanks for watching, and bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video, I will explain what statements are in computer programming. What is a statement? In computer language, statement basically is a group of words, numbers, operators that performs a specific task. Now, this group of words could also include things like comments. Comments are basically a way of explaining various parts of your computer code. So a statement is a combination of words, numbers, operators, and the various components that the programming language needs to create a program. So the various components of a statement can include values. Values are like the data that the computer program needs to function. For example, a value could be a number, it could be a text, which in programming terms is referred to as a string. It can also be expression. It could also be operators like a plus operator, minus operator. Those are known as operators. Could be a keyword like var, could be comments. So these are various components that you can have in a statement. When the computer program runs, it looks at the statements in the code and it runs or executes from top to bottom, left to right, one by one. Just the way you hopefully read a book from top to bottom, computer programming is executed or runs the computer programs from top to bottom and from left to right. So usually the order is executed in the same order in which the statement is written. In computer programming, to run a program means to execute a program. A statement is just like a sentence in English language, and just like in sentences, you can have different components that make up the sentence. A typical computer program will consist of multiple statements. I have opened up a blank web page, and the web page is called about:blank. So if you type this into your web browser and just press enter, it will give you a blank page. So what we're going to do is going to access the developer tool console. So to do that, if you just right click on inspect and click on console, and that will give you the console area. So in this area here, we can play around and experiment with some JavaScript code. So I'm going to write a very simple JavaScript statement. So I'm going to say A equals to B times 7. This is a complete statement. Even though it's simple, it's a complete statement. Just like in the English language, you can end your statement with a full stop. In some programming languages, they have different punctuations depending on the language. In JavaScript, you typically end your statement with a semicolon. So this is a typical valid statement in JavaScript. Let me quickly run through the statement with you. The characters A and B are called variables. Variables are basically like simple boxes that you can use to store any of your stuff in. In computer programming, you can use variables to store data. Okay? In programs, variables are used to hold values. A value could be a number like 7, and the values are things or data that the program will use. So you can think of variables as a symbolic placeholders for the values that they contain. Now, this number 7 here is basically a value in itself, and it's called a literal value. This is because it stands alone without being stored in a variable. The equals to and this asterisk here, both characters are called operators. They are used to perform actions with the values and variables, such as an assignment and mathematical multiplication. This equals to is known as an assignment operator, and this asterisk is known as a multiplication operator. So basically what this is doing here is saying that A is equals to the value of B times 7. All right, so once you get the value of B, you times it by 7 and store it back in A. That's basically what that statement is saying. There are different types of operators. This is just one that I have illustrated with. Now, most statements in JavaScript end or are concluded with a semicolon at the end. This is specific to JavaScript. Other languages have different syntax requirement. So this statement A equals B times 7 basically tells the computer to get the current value that is stored in the variable B, multiply that value by 7, then store the result back into the variable we call A. That's what this statement is saying. So programs are just a collection of many statements which together describe all the steps that it takes to perform a computer program. So you may have a basic program, for example, that adds numbers together. So the various steps that you have to specify for the computer to follow, they are collectively referred to as statements. Hello and welcome. In this video, I will explain what expressions are in computer programming. What is an expression? An expression is any reference to a variable or value or a set of variables and values combined with operators. A variable is basically a container that is used to store values which the program will use, and values are represented by different types of data structures. For example, a number like number 7 is a value. A Boolean value. Boolean values are values that are either true or false. So there can only be two outcomes. Those are known as Boolean values. Also, a collection of text, which is also referred to as a string data type. So it's like the text characters strung like a string. So they're referred to as a string in programming. So also you have operators. For example, the addition operator, multiplication operator, assignment operators, all these combined together are what is used to refer to as an expression. Computer program is basically a bunch of statements, and statements are made up of one or more expressions. So let's take a look at a very basic expression. It's a complete statement. This is known as a statement in programming. This here is a JavaScript statement. So this statement basically has 4 expressions inside it. We've got the 7. This is known as a literal value expression. So the number 7 is referred to as a literal value expression. The B is known as a variable expression, which means it basically retrieves its current value. Okay, so a variable expression is used to retrieve its current value. The b times 7 is known as an arithmetic expression, which means it's basically doing something. So it's multiplying this. So b times 7 basically means you're multiplying the value of this by 7. So that's referred to as an arithmetic expression. The value a equals b times 2 is known as an assignment expression. This equals to here is an assignment expression, which means it is used to assign the result of b times 7 to the variable a. Okay, so anywhere you see an equals to sign is known as an assignment expression. It is used to place a value inside a variable. This here, b times 7, this is an expression that basically stands alone, and it is referred to as an expression statement. So expressions are an important part of computer programming. So when you are writing your statements for your computer programs, they are also used to write the statements. Whenever you write statements, you must include various type of expressions. So that's it for this introduction to expressions. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, I will be introducing you to JavaScript variables. What are variables in JavaScript? JavaScript variables are containers for storing data values. In order to create a variable, you need to use the var keyword, which is spelled VAR. It has to be in lowercase. Also, when you create variables, creating variable means declaring variables. It's the same thing. When you declare variables, you have to assign a value to variables, and you use the equal sign to assign values to a variable. For example, if I wanted to create a variable x, I'm going to give it a value of 7. Also, if I want to create a variable called, say, my car, and I give it a value of Porsche. When you are creating variables, it's always good practice to name your variables closely to what they are going to store, the type of data they're going to store. For example, here I've named this variable my car, which is an indication that the type of data I'm storing is relating to cars. Notice the two difference in the two values here. This one here, the value is 7, which is a number. And notice here, the value here is a Porsche, and I've put quote around it. When you are declaring variables, if you are declaring a text, you have to enclose it in quotes. You either have to use single quotes or double quotes, but you can't mix them. You can't use a single quote here and then a double quote here. That's the only way the computer will understand that it is dealing with a text. You need to enclose the values in quotes. You don't need to do that with numbers, because the computer knows that that is a number. But if you want the computer to know that is a string, they call it a string in programming. If you want to know that this is a string, you need to enclose it in quotes. Also notice I've used semicolons here, which is important. That indicates that that is the end of that statement. A JavaScript program is basically a collection of statements. This indicates this is one statement. This indicates this is another statement because of the semicolon. So you have to do that when you're declaring variables. You can also declare variables without assigning them a value. So when you declare a variable without a value, it is known as undefined. Once you have defined or declared a variable, you can change its value. For example, here I've already defined a variable called my car. If I wanted to change the value from Porsche, for example, to a Range Rover, all I need to do is call the variable by name and assign it a different value. So that way I've already changed the value. Once you've declared the variable, you can change the value. A variable that is declared without a value is known as undefined. Also, it's very important to know that JavaScript is case sensitive. So for example, here I've declared this variable my car with uppercase C. If I try to reference it with a lowercase c, it will not work. You can experiment with JavaScript inside your web browser console. If you are using a Mac, you can access your web browser console by clicking on Option, Command, and J once you've got the web browser open. If you are on a Windows-based computer, once you've got the web browser open, you can just press F12. That will give you the web console. I have got the Google homepage open, so I'm going to access the web console just by hitting the F12 on the keyboard, and that will give me the console. So this is the developer console where you can experiment with JavaScript. So there are different ways you can dock it. So if you click here, at the moment it's docked to the side. You can also dock it to the bottom, and that will give you the page, the web page you're currently viewing. And then you can experiment with the code on the side, or you can do it on this side, dock it to the left. So depending on whatever you fancy, you can dock it wherever you like. I'm going to just dock it underneath for now. So let's try and experiment with some JavaScript. So I'm going to declare a variable. Inside the console here, I'll just type in var to declare a variable, and I'll give the variable a name of x, give it a value of 7. So now if I want to call this variable, all I need to do is call the variable by its name. If I press X, it will return the value of 7. Now that I've declared the variable, I can also change its value. All I need to do is call it by its name, use the equals to, and assign it a different value. Now if I call the variable X again, it no longer stores 7, but it now stores 8. Same thing if I declare another variable called, let's declare a new variable. I'm going to call this variable my car. Okay. My car. Okay, I'll give it my car, and I'm going to give it a value of, say, Porsche. Okay, and I need a semicolon to end that. So now if I call this variable by its name, if I say, for example, if I call it by car, it will not work. You know why? Because I've referenced it in lowercase. The C I use is in uppercase. So it's very important that you reference your variables the way you've defined them. If I now go back and call it again with uppercase C, it should return the right. You can see it's giving me the value of Porsche. And once you've declared a variable, you can easily change its name, change its value. So if I want to change that to something else, I'll just call it by name. So I want to change this to a Ford, for example. All right, and do a semicolon. Now that's changed it. If I call the variable again by name, it will no longer store Range Rover, it will be now storing a Ford. So these are some of the basic examples you can use to play around in the browser console. The console is very useful for playing around with little values like this, so you can experiment and get acquainted. So that's it for this video on JavaScript variables. Many thanks and bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video I'll be showing you some variable naming convention. These are basic rules that you need to follow when giving your variable names. So I'm just going to read through this table. So the first thing to take into account is that variable names cannot start with numerical. For example, you can't use a number. You can't name a variable 3x or 4 cars. Just for example, those would be illegal variable names. However, you can combine the numbers with text. You can call a variable maybe cars 4 or go for it and things like that. They are perfect valid variable name. You cannot use operators. Operators, I mean either mathematical or logical operators. You can't use that in variable names. For example, you can't call a variable this plus that, or this minus that, or this times that. You can't do that. You cannot use any punctuation marks of any kind in a JavaScript variable name other than the underscore. So you can't call your variable car colon or car hash, but you can use an underscore. Underscore is allowed, so you can give your variable name underscore car, for example, or something underscore something or thing. That is allowed. JavaScript variable names must never contain spaces. Never. For example, you can't name your variable my car space car. That's not allowed. However, you can give it my car. That is legal. There cannot be any spaces between variable names. Variable names are case sensitive. For example, if you declare a variable called my car, it's different from a variable called my car or my car. They are all different variations. So when you're declaring variable names, you've got to be careful the case you use, so that when you want to refer to that variable name, you are referencing the correct variable. It's like having the key to the wrong door. If you don't have the right key, you will not be able to open the door. So you must make sure you have your variable names correct in the correct case. Finally, you cannot use any JavaScript keywords. Keywords are parts of the JavaScript language itself. You can't use any of that for variable names. For example, window is a keyword in JavaScript. It's part of the language. Things like open is part of the language. Location or string, those are all part of the JavaScript language, so it will be illegal to use them on their own. However, you can use them in combination with other things, other keywords. For example, you can call a variable that window, or maybe my string, or whatever. You can combine them with other text. That is acceptable. So these are just some key basic rules you need to take into consideration when you are giving your variable names. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.
Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be introducing you to JavaScript arrays. What is an array? An array is basically a structure that allows you to store multiple values in one single reference. Basically, what that means is that it stores multiple values in a single variable. So an array is a special variable which can hold more than one value at a time. in comparison to a variable that can only hold one value at a time. An example of an array is this here. For example, you create an array called myData and you use the equals to assign the values. You can tell it's an array because the values of an array are enclosed in square brackets. Also, you can have different data types in an array. In this example here, I've got both number and string data type as values in an array. So let's create a simple array using our web console. To create an array, you have to create the variable first. So you just type in var to create or define the variable. You do a space followed by the name you want to call the variable. I'm going to call my data. You then use the equals to sign to create the array, and you use the opening square brackets and you add the values or the elements in the array. You can mix data types. In my example here, I'm going to mix the data type with a string and also a number. So I've got a number and a string. I'm going to add another number and then I'll add another string. When you are using string, don't forget to enclose them in quotes. And when you are using arrays, you separate each of the elements in the array by a comma. You can see I've got comma here and comma here. Only the last value or element that does not require a comma. So now that we've created an array, to call the array, we just need to call it by its name, which is myData, and it will display the information. The information here tells you that we've got an array of 4 elements, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, and it gives you the values. If I expand this, you will see all these figures here. They are known as index. The way you access the elements in an array is via the index. So the very first element or value has index 0. The next one will have index 1 and so on. You can see here index 0 belongs to 7. Index 1 belongs to John. Index 2 belongs to 17. Index 3 belongs to Jane, and so on. It tells you here the length of the array is 4 because it has 4 elements or values inside the array. So if I wanted to access Jane, the way I would do that would be myData and then square bracket, and I'll type in 3 because that's the index for Jane, and press enter, and see it's giving me the value of Jane because Jane has an index of 3, as you can see here from the index. So always remember that when you're trying to access the values in an array, you have to access them using their index, and the index starts from 0 upwards. When you work with arrays, it is easy to remove elements and also add new elements to an array using a process called popping and pushing. If you want to add elements, you use a method called pushing to add an element, and if you want to remove, you use a method called popping. So popping will remove, and pushing will add an element to an array. So let's add an element to our array, and the way we do that, we call the array by its name, which is, in my case, is called my data, and then you add a dot and type in push, and then in parentheses you specify the value you're trying to push into the array. So let's say I'm trying to add a number 10 into the array, and I'll press enter. So you can see now it's now showing that the array has 5 values. So if I want to call this array again, called my data, it will now show that the length is 5, you see, because I've now added a new element, which is this number 10 here. So if I expand that, you can see the index. We've got a new index for 4, which is number 10. If I wanted to remove an element from the array, okay, so I can do that using the pop method. The pop method will remove the value that I've just added. So let's remove the value I've just added. So I'll type in my data dot pop, and this will remove the very last value I have just added on. You can see here it tells me 10 has been removed. So if I now reference this array now, it should go back to the original value, which is an array of 4. You can see here this is the original length. So that's basically how you can add and remove an element from an array. So this concludes this brief introduction to JavaScript arrays. There are other types of arrays, and there are so many things you can do using JavaScript array. This is just an introduction to what an array is. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.
Hello and welcome. In this video, I will introduce you to some JavaScript data types. In programming in general, and also in JavaScript, the data type basically refers to the classification that specifies the type of value that a variable has or stores. There are different types of data types in JavaScript. Here's a basic table with some basic JavaScript data types. So I'm going to start with the top one, which is a string. A string basically is a sequence of text that must be enclosed in quotes. You can use either single quotes or double quotes, but you cannot mix the quotes. For example, here you can declare a variable called my data and set it to this value. You can see I've got quotes around it. I've got my web console open. So the way to access your web console, if you are on a Windows computer, open up just Google homepage and type in Ctrl, Shift and J on your keyboard, or F12, and that will give you access to the web console. If you are on a Mac, you do Command, Shift and J. That will give you access to the console. So let's create a simple variable that will store a string data type. So in my console, I'm going to create a new variable by typing in the keyword var, and I'm going to call this variable my colors. Okay, and I'm going to give it a value. I'm going to give this value of red. So that's the value. You can see I've enclosed the value in quotes, which means it's a string data type. The computer will recognize that as a string data type. So if I want to reference this variable, all I need to do is call it by its name, and it will just return the value read. So that's a simple example of how a string data type can be used. The next data type I want to mention is the number data type. Basically, it refers to any numerical value, and it does not need to have a quote around its value. So let me illustrate by creating a simple variable that will store a number data type. So I'll declare a simple variable by typing in the keyword var, and I'll call this variable door number, and I'll give it a value of 7. So this is known as a number data type. You can see it doesn't need quotes around it. So if I want to reference that variable, I just call it by its name, number, and it will return a value of 7. The next data type I want to mention is called a Boolean. A Boolean basically represents two values. One can be true, the other can be false. And when you're using Boolean values, no quotes required. To illustrate a Boolean value, I'm just going to compare two values. I'm going to say 4 is greater than 3. That will return true. And if I say 3 is greater than 4, and that will return false. So that's basically how Boolean value data types work. The next data type I want to mention is called an array. An array is a data structure that stores multiple values as one single reference. Basically what that means, a variable can store only one value, but with an array you can store multiple values as one single reference. You can see here I've got two values here, Ford and Toyota, but I'm referencing it under one variable called my cars. So let me show you a quick illustration inside the console. So I'm going to declare a variable called my cars, and I'm going to set it to equals 2, and this is how you declare an array with square brackets, and inside the square brackets is where you place the values. So let's say the first value, I say it's a Ford, and second value I say is a Toyota. When you are using arrays, you separate each of the values with a comma, but the only where you don't need a comma is the very last value. So this basically here is an array, and the way you access the values in an array is via their index. So the way an array is referenced is by their index. So this will be known as a 0 index. This will be 1. If you have several, you can have as many as possible inside the square bracket, but you need to separate the values with a comma. And if they are of a string data type, you enclose it in quotes. If they are not, then you don't need to enclose it in quotes. So for example, if I wanted to access value number 1, this is 0, index 0, which is Ford. All I need to do is type in my cars, and in lowercase, type in my cars, and then in square brackets, I type in value 0, which will represent the index I'm trying to target, and that should return, you can see it has returned Ford. So that's how you, if I had like 20 inside here, I will reference it via the index based number. So Ford, the very first value is a 0 index, Toyota will be index number 1, and so on. So that's how you access the values in an array. So the key difference between an array and variable is that an array can store multiple values as one value. If you see here, I just got this variable called my colors, and it's only stored one value. Here I've got a variable called my cars, and it stores multiple values but referenced as a single value called my cars. The next data type I want to quickly mention is called the object. Everything in JavaScript is basically an object. So all the examples I've shown so far, they are basically objects. You can also represent JavaScript objects with curly braces, as I've done here. I've declared a variable called person and set the value to equals to the first name, got John, last name, Doe. So you can represent an object like this way as well, but by using curly braces. So if I wanted to access this object here, all I need to do is call the variable by its name, and it will return you can see it's returned the first name as John, last name as Doe. Another data type I want to introduce you to is called null. You may come across this in your learning with JavaScript, and basically a null data type is something that does not exist. You can also use the null data type to empty the value of a variable, and a null is also an object data type. So you can see here I've got a variable here called door number and with a value of 7. So I can empty that value by just typing in the name of the variable, which is dot number, and setting the value to null, and that will empty the current data it stores. So if I call this variable called door number now, it will come back saying null because I've emptied out the whatever it was storing. Okay, so a null data type means basically nothing. It doesn't store anything. There's nothing in there. The final data type I want to talk about is called undefined. Undefined is similar to null. The only difference is that they are different data type. Undefined is undefined, while a null data type is also an object data type. So if you declare a variable and you don't give it a value, that will become undefined. For example, if I come here and say variable sweets and I don't give it any value, that will become undefined. If I try to call it by its name, it will come back undefined. So that's the key difference. The key difference between a null and undefined is that undefined is not an object data type, while null is an object data type. So that's basically it for this video on JavaScript data types. Thanks for watching, and bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be showing you some basic examples of how you can mix data types. When you are creating certain variables or objects in JavaScript, you can mix the data type. For example, in an array, you can have an array that contains a string and also a number. So let me create a very basic variable. I'm going to create a variable and I'm going to call this variable X. I'm going to give it a value which is going to be an array. You can tell it's an array because I'm using square brackets, and I'm going to give the first value in the array. I'm going to make that a string. We'll call that John. So you separate each value in an array with a comma, and I'm going to make the second value in the array a number. So here I've created a basic object, which is an array that has two values, which is also known as the length. So the length of this array is 2. So if I press enter, it comes undefined because I've not referenced it. So if I want to reference it, I just call it by its name, which is X, and press enter. So it tells me here that this is an array and it has two values, or length 2. And it tells you here the values, John and 0. So if I expand this now, you can see an array basically is referenced by their index. So the very first value will be index 0 and the second value will be index 1. So if I wanted to access, for example, this value called 7, I'll have to reference it by this index 1. And it tells you a length. That means the length of the array is 2. It's got two values. So you can see it's possible to mix data types. So I've mixed a string and a number data type inside an array object. When mixing data types, you also have to be careful because it can lead to some unexpected results. For example, when you are performing calculation, so you got to be careful not to mix a string value and a number value. So let me illustrate. So let's say I create a variable a and give it a value of, say, 7 plus 7. All right, and I create another variable. I'll call this variable b, and I'll give this a value of 7 plus 7. So I've got two variables now. If I call variable a will return a value of 14, which is 7 plus 7. If I call variable b, it will return a value of 77. Because the first value is a string, so it uses this plus sign to concatenate or add the 7 to the string. So if I call the variable b now, it will return 77. So you got to be careful when you're doing calculations so as not to mix a string and a number if you don't want unexpected result. It's okay if you're expecting the values that gets returned, but if you're not expecting it, then you need to be cautious when you are mixing a number, for example, and a string. If I, for example, create another variable here, I'll call this variable c, and I'll set that to equals to, say, a string, and I'll call this hello, and I'll concatenate this. I'll add a number 7. Now if I call this variable c, I expect it to return hello 7. All right, so that's basically how you mix variable, but you gotta be careful when you're doing calculations so you don't get unexpected results. So that's basically it for this video. Thank you for watching, and bye for now. Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, I'll be introducing you to JavaScript operators. An operator is a mathematical symbol which produces a result based on two values or variables. You should have already come across some of these operators. For example, the addition, multiplication, subtraction, and division. These are all referred to as arithmetic operators. There are different types of operators in JavaScript. We've got the arithmetic operators. We've got the assignment operator. We've got the string operator, sometimes called concatenation. We've got the comparison operator. We've got the logical operator and the type operators. I will be briefly explaining each of these operators in separate videos. Thank you for watching, and bye for now. Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, I'll be explaining what arithmetic operators are and also showing you basic examples. Arithmetic operators are operators that are used to perform arithmetic actions or functions on numbers or variables. Here's a table of some basic arithmetic operators. So I'll start from the top where we've got the addition operator, and basically that is used to add numbers or values together. For example, 2 plus 2. We've got the subtraction operator, which is used to subtract numbers or values. Example, 4 subtract 2. Next, we've got the multiplication operator, which is basically used to multiply numbers or values. Example, 7 times 3. In programming and in JavaScript, multiplication is represented by the asterisk symbol. Next, we've got the division, which is used to divide numbers or values. Example, we divide 4 by 8. Next, we've got the modulus, which is represented by the percent sign. A modulus operator is used to return the remainder from a division. So when you divide two numbers, modulus will return only what is left from the division. Next, we've got the increment operator, which is represented by two plus symbols. What that does, it increases the value of a number or a variable. For example, if you've got a variable that has a value of 7 and you want to increase that value to 8, you call the variable name and then you add the plus symbol, which is the increment operator, and that will increase the value by 1. The opposite of that is the decrement operator, which is used to decrease the value of a number or a variable by 1. So these are the basic arithmetic operators in JavaScript. You also find that these are identical to most programming languages as well. So I'm going to go over to my console and basically show you some basic examples. Open up Google homepage, and on the Google homepage, to access the console, if you are on a Windows computer, you press Control, Shift and J. If you're on a Mac, you press Command, Shift and J. That will give you access to the console. So I've got my console open, and you should have this underlined next to the word console. So let me just run through the basic arithmetic operator. The first I want to illustrate is a basic addition. You may already know this already, so do apologize if I'm going through this again. So I'm just going to illustrate by adding two numbers together. I'm going to do 2 plus 2 and press enter, and that will give you 4. Next, let me illustrate the subtraction. I'm going to subtract two numbers. I'll subtract 4 from 2. I'll press enter on my keyboard, and that will return a value of 2. Next, I want to multiply two numbers. So I'll do a 7 and an asterisk. Asterisk is what you use to represent multiplication in JavaScript. And I'm going to multiply 7 by 3. I press enter. That returns 21. Next, I'm going to illustrate a division example. I'm going to divide two numbers. So I'll divide 8 by 4, and you represent division with the slash symbol. Press enter and that will return 2. Next, I want to illustrate the modulus operator. Modulus will only return the value of what is left after a division. So I'll do 5 and the percent to represent modulus. So I expect this to return 1 because 2 can only go into 5 twice, and it should be, remember, 1. You can see it's returned 1. Next, I want to illustrate how the increment operator works. First, I'm going to declare a variable called x. I'm going to give it a value of 7. So now if I call that variable x, it will return 7. So if I want to change the value from 7 to 8, I can use the increment operator by just calling the variable by its name and doing plus twice, and that will increase it. If I now call the variable by its name, it should now return a value of 8. Next, I want to illustrate how the decrement operator works. First, I'm going to declare a variable called y. I'm going to give it a value of 5. Next, if I call that variable, it will return the 5. Say, for example, I want to decrease it to 4. I'll just call the variable by its name and use the decrement operator, which is 2 dashes, and press enter. Now if I call that variable y, it will now show me a value of 4. So that's basically how the decrement operator works. So these are just very basic examples to illustrate how the JavaScript arithmetic operators work. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be introducing you to JavaScript assignment operators. Assignment operators are basically used to assign values to JavaScript variables. This is a table of a basic assignment operator. We have used this so far in this course. The assignment operator is represented by the equals to sign, and that basically assigns a value to a variable. For example, you can have a variable called x and assign it a value of 27. There are also other types of assignment operators. For example, if you add a plus in front of the equals to sign, what that will do, it will add a variable to another. So for example, here I've got a variable x and I've added a plus in front of the equals to sign, and then I've signed it a value of y. Basically that is the same thing as x equals to x plus y. You can also add a subtraction sign before the equals to, and that will subtract. If you had a multiplication sign before the equals to sign, that will multiply. If you have a division, that will divide. If you have a modulus, and so on. So it operates in the same principle as the plus and equals to sign works. So I've got my console open, so I'm just going to declare a simple variable and use the assignment operator to give it a value. So I'm going to create a variable called z, and I'm going to use the assignment operator to give it a value of 15. So the assignment operator has now assigned the variable z a value of 15. So if I want to call this variable, I just call it by its name, which is z, and it will return a value of 15. Now I can add or subtract to that value. For example, I can call the variable z and use the plus and equals to operator, and assign it a value of, say, 5. That will now give that value 20. You can see the value has increased to 20. So I can also do the opposite. So I can do variable z, and I'll use the minus and equals to sign and say I make it 8. That will decrease the value from 20 to 12. All right, and you can do the multiplication the same way and do division and then modulus. So that's basically how you use the assignment operator. But the most popular way to use the assignment operator is just the first example here, where I just assign, you use the equals to sign to assign a value to a variable. But you can also use it in combination with the arithmetic operators to add, subtract, divide, and do remainders and all kind of stuff. So that's basically it for this video on assignment operators. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, I'll be introducing you to JavaScript operator precedence. Operator precedence basically describes the order in which operations are performed in an arithmetic expression. The best way to show you this is by actually illustrating an example. So I've got my console here, so I'm going to create a variable. So I'm going to create a variable called J. You could call your variable anything. I'm going to give it a value of 150 plus 70 and multiply by 4. This is going to be the value for my variable called J. So if I press enter and try call this variable by name, it's going to give me a value of 430. Now, if you use a calculator, you get a different result. So if you input 150 plus 70 times 4 on your calculator, it will return a value of 880. The reason we get a different value here inside the console is that in programming and also in JavaScript, there is a precedence of operators. So what that basically means is that in terms of the order in which the operations are performed, multiplication and division have a higher precedence than addition and subtraction. That is why the multiplication is done first. So it will do the 70 times 4 first before it adds the 150. So that is known as a precedence. So the precedence is that where there is multiplication and division involved, it will take higher order than where there is addition or subtraction involved. So it does the multiplication first, then the addition. If there was division, it will do that first, and then the multiplication. There is a precedence in the operator action. However, you can use parentheses to change that order. If you wanted the addition to be done first, all you need to do, come here, do variable J, and I'm going to set that to equals to, I'll do a parentheses, I'll type in 150 plus 70, and I will close the parentheses. So what that does, it will do the addition first because I've wrapped it round the parentheses, which gives it a higher order. And then I can now do the multiplication. So if I do this, return this variable, it will now give me a value of 880 because I have forced the addition to compute that operation first before the multiplication is done. So I press enter. If I call the variable j now, I should get 880, which is the figure you will get if you had used a standard calculator. But in programming and in JavaScript, there is a precedence in the way the operator actions are performed. So if you want a particular operator to compute its value first, you need to wrap it round parentheses, and that will give it a higher order in the operator precedence. So that's basically how operator precedence works. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be introducing you to the JavaScript comparison operators. JavaScript comparison operators are used to compare values and will return a Boolean result. Boolean basically means true or false. So when you use JavaScript comparison operators, it will always return either a true value or a false value. So this is basic table illustrating some comparison operators. So I'll start from the top, which the first is known as the equal operator, and it's represented with the double equal symbol. So what that does, it checks if values are equal. Okay, so if you want to compare if two values are equal, you use the equal to operator. If you want to check if values are equal both in value and data type, you use the strictly equals to, which is represented with a triple equal sign. A single equal is used to assign a value. So we must be careful between the distinction between single equals or double. If you want to check if something is equal to something, you use a double equals. So if you want to assign a value like you do in variables, you use just a single equal. If you want to compare that the values are strictly equal in both data type and value, you use the triple equal symbol. If you want to check if values are not equal, you use the exclamation mark and the equals to sign. That will check if the values are not equal. If you want to check if the values are strictly not equal in value and data type, you use the exclamation and double equal symbol. So if you want to check if a value is greater than another value, you use the greater than sign. For example, you want to check if 5 is greater than 2. If you want to check if a value is less, you use the less than symbol, which checks if a number is less than another number or value. You can also use the greater than or equal to, which is represented by the greater than sign and the equals to sign. What that does, it checks if the values is greater than or equal to. The less than or equal to is represented by the less than symbol and the equals to sign. This checks if the value is less than or equal to. So I'm going to jump into the console now and give you some basic examples of these comparison operators. So when you're using comparison operators, they will always return either a true or false result. Say for example, if I want to check if 4 is equals to 5, that will return false because 4 is not equals to 5. If I want to check if a value is strictly equals in type and also in value. So what I'll do first, I'll create a variable, call a variable called x. I'll give this a value of 7. I'll create a variable called y, and I'll give this a value of 7, but the 7 will be a string value. So which means the data type is different from variable X. So now I can do a comparison. I can say X is equals to Y. This will return to true because both of them have a value of 7. Now if I use the triple equals to, it will return to false because the data type is different but the value is the same. So if I do X triple equals to Y, that will give me a result of false because they are not equal in data type. The variable Y has a data type of string. You can tell because of the quotes that is enclosed around the value, and variable X is numerical, which has a value of 7. So they are the same in value but not the same in data type. So if you want to check if two values are the same, for example, if I say 8 is not equals to 7, that will return true because 8 is bigger than 7, so it is not equal to 7. So if you want to check if a number is greater than another number, you want to check if 9 is greater than, say, 8, that will evaluate to be true because 9 is greater than 8. If we say 8, we call 8 is less than, say, 7, that again we evaluate to be true because 8 is greater than 7. So here I'm using the less than sign comparing if 8 is less than 7. That has returned false because 8 is greater than 7. If I was to say 7 is less than 8, that will evaluate to be true because 7 is less than 8. So let me create a couple of variables. I'll create a variable A. I give it a value of 17 and I use the comparison. So if I say A is greater than or equals to 17, that will evaluate to be true because the variable A here is 17. So I'm saying A is greater than or equal to 17. So that evaluates to be true. If I create another variable, say I create a variable B and assign it a value of 10, and I want to check comparison. So if I say is variable B less than or equals to 9, that will evaluate to be false because B is 10. So these are basic examples of comparison operators. Once you understand the basic concepts, then it'll be easy for you to use the comparison operators. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be introducing you to the JavaScript logical operators. The JavaScript logical operators are used to determine the logic between variables or values. So this is a basic table that shows you two logical operators. The first is called the and is represented by the ampersand symbol. What that does, it checks if all the conditions are met, and it will return a Boolean result, either true or false. If all the conditions are met, it will return true. If not, it returns false. The next is the OR operator, which is represented by the pipe symbol. It checks if any condition has been met, and it will return a true Boolean result. So the key distinction between the AND and the OR is that when you're using the AND to check conditions, all the conditions has to evaluate to true. If they are not met, then it will return a false Boolean result. Boolean result basically means true or false. In the OR operator, you only have to satisfy one condition. It will return true result. So let me quickly illustrate how the logical operators are used in the console. So I'm going to start by creating a couple of variables. I'll create variable x. I'll give it a value of 7. I'll create another variable, and I'm going to call this variable y, and I'll give it a value of 6. Now I can use the logical operators to check the condition. So I can say x is less than 10, if x is less than 10, and y is greater than 6. This will evaluate to be false because the first condition is true, x is less than 10, but the second condition is false because y is not greater than 6, so it will evaluate to be false. So if I use the OR operator with the same condition, it will return true because one part of the condition is true, so it will return everything as true. For example, the same illustration, if I come here and say x is less than 10 or y is greater than 6, this will evaluate to be true because the first part of the condition is true, x is less than 10. So that's basically how you use a logical operator in a nutshell. Once you understand this basic use of it, then it will be able to it will make more sense when you start using it later. Thank you for watching, and bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be introducing you to conditionals. Conditionals are code structures which allow you to test if an expression or a condition returns true or not. They are used to perform different actions based on different conditions. The common conditional statements are an if statement. Basically, an if statement is used to specify a block of code that will be executed if a specified condition is true. We also have an else statement, basically that checks if the condition that is set within the if statement is true or false. If that is false, then the code inside the else block will execute. So the else statement will only come into effect if the condition set within the if statement returns false. So in my console, I've got a variable here that I've defined called my number, and I've given it a value of 7, and I'm using an if statement, which is a conditional statement, to test a condition. So I'm checking if the variable called my num is equals to 7. If it is, the code, this code here will be executed, which says console.log basically means it will print out this message inside this console. It will say lucky 7 if the condition is true. But looking at the condition, this condition is definitely true because the variable has a value of 7, and I'm just checking here. This is the condition. The expression inside the if, which is this here, is the test. Okay, so this uses the identity operator, which is this equals to here, to compare the value, to compare if this value here is 7, if it's equals to 7. If it is, it will print out that. So I'm just going to press enter, and it will print out lucky 7 in the console. So in this case, the condition is true, so no other code needs to be executed. However, you can also create a condition in which you add an else statement, so that if the condition inside the if statement is wrong, then a different block of code will execute, which is located inside the else block. So here I've got another variable, same called my number. I've changed the value to 10, and here I've included two statements, the if statement and the else statement. So what happens is the comparison is made, the condition is tested, and the test is inside the if block inside here. So it's testing if this variable my number is equals to 7. This will return false because the value is 10. So what that happens, this block of code here that says lucky 7 will not run, so it will not get executed because the value is wrong. So what happens, it will skip this block and it will execute this code because this condition inside the if is wrong. It doesn't evaluate to 10. So once the comparison has been made, it will run the code that matches the comparison. So in this case, the code inside the comparison is made inside the if block. So it's tested the condition. The condition tested false because the value 7 is not equal to 7. So it's not equals to 10. So this block of code here that says lucky 7 will not run. Instead, it will run this inside the console. Anywhere you see console.log means it's going to print a message inside the console. So if I press enter, you can see it's saying you're not very lucky today because this condition that we tested did not evaluate to true. So this code here is executed instead. So in a very simple example here to illustrate how the conditional statement works. So there are other types of conditional statement, but the very basic is the if and the else statement. So the key thing to note here using the if and else statement is that the condition to be tested or the expression to be tested is always located in the if block. So that's where you set the condition. You can see here I've set the condition here. So if that condition does not evaluate to be true, then the block of code inside the if statement is skipped and the one in the else block is executed. So in between the curly braces, that's the opening curly braces and that's the closing curly braces, is where you write the block of code that will execute. You can see here this is the block for the if, and in the else one you got the opening curly braces and the closing curly braces, and in between you've got the code block that executes if the condition within the if statement or the if block is wrong. So that's it. I hope it makes sense. If not, please let me know. Thank you and bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video I will be introducing you to JavaScript functions. Functions are a way of packaging functionality that you wish to reuse. So a function basically can refer to a block or a piece of code that is designed to perform a particular task. A JavaScript function is executed when something invokes it. By invoke, I mean calls it. So in order to activate a function after it has been created, you need to invoke it or call it. And usually you do that by its name. JavaScript has many built-in functions that you can use. A very popular one is the alert, which enables you to create pop-up box messages. JavaScript also enables you to create your own functions. And the way you create your own functions in JavaScript is by using the function keyword. Functions often takes arguments. Arguments are bits of data that the functions need in order to perform or do their jobs. And these arguments are placed inside parentheses, which are separated by commas if there are more than one argument. So inside my console, I have created a function. And the way you create a function, you basically have to type in the keyword function followed by the name you want to call the function. When you're creating function, it's very nice to name your functions as closely as possible to the task that the function is meant to perform. See, my function, I've called it add num, which indicates that this function is going to be used to add numbers together. So when you create a function, you first of all have to type in the word function followed by a space, then the name of the function, and then you have to have parentheses. Sometimes the parentheses can be empty, but you must have that in order to create a function. And then if you've got any arguments, you pass that argument inside the parentheses. If there's more than one argument, you separate them by a comma. You can see here num1 is an argument, num2 is referred to as an argument. And once you specify the arguments, if there are any, inside the parentheses, and then you have this curly braces. You've got the opening curly braces here and the closing curly braces. And inside, in between the curly braces, is the block of code that has to be executed when the function is invoked or called. Notice here I've also got a return statement here. Basically, the return statement tells the browser to return the result variable out of the function, so it is available to use. All right, this is necessary because variables defined inside functions are only available inside those functions. This is called variable scope. So when you create a variables can be available throughout the application or throughout the scope, which is known as global. So if you create a variable and you declare it outside the function, that makes that variable global. That means you can use it anywhere within the block of code. But if you define a variable inside a function like I've done here, I've defined a variable called result, and I've set that variable result to equals to whatever value is passed as number 1 and added to value passed as number 2. So this variable is local to this function, so it can only be accessed inside this function. So when a variable exists inside a function, once the function has been executed, the variable basically is destroyed, or it becomes on you can't use it again. Once the function has been called, that's it served its purpose. However, if you want the variable to be available, you have to use the return statement. That way it will tell the browser to return the result of the variable out of the function so that it is available to use. You only do this for variables defined inside the function. They are known as a local variable scope. So variables defined outside the function are global, so you can access them from anywhere within the JavaScript code, whereas variables defined inside a function like I have done here are referred to as a local scope variable. So here I have defined this variable called addNum. Now to make or to invoke this function, now that I've created it, all I need to do is call the function by its name, which is addNum, and then you must add the parentheses, and then I'm going to pass it two values because I've got two arguments there. So if I say 10, 20, and I close the parentheses and I press enter, that will add 10 and 20 together and give me 30. All right, so anytime I want to use this function, all I need to do is call the function by its name and then pass in two arguments. You can see it saves me having to rewrite the function again. I've already written it, defined it. All I need to do is just call it and pass in whatever arguments I need for the function. So for example, you can create the same thing maybe for multiplication or anything. This is just a basic illustration to show you the importance of functions. So you can create functions for different kind of tasks or to do different things, but once you've created a function, you don't have to write all the code again. All you need to do is just call the function by its name and pass in whatever arguments you need to do, like I've passed in here, and then the function executes. If I want to pass in more arguments, I just call the function by its name and I'll pass in, say, I'll do 6 and 6, and that will add 6 and 6 together. It will return 12 because I've already written all the functions here. So all I need to do is call it by its name and pass in the argument. So that's basically how you create and use a function. Functions is a very powerful concept in JavaScript. I've only barely scratched the surface here. This is just an introduction to JavaScript function. There's a lot more to it. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching and bye for now.
Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, I'll be briefly explaining JavaScript linting tools. What are JavaScript linting tools? They are basically JavaScript code quality tools that enables you to check for errors or mistakes in your JavaScript code or script. If you are using the brackets text editor, it comes baked in with two JavaScript linting tools. So it has JSLint and ESLint. They are both baked into the brackets text editor. So if you've got the brackets editor installed, you should have the JSLint and ESLint. They both basically do the same thing. They check for errors, but they do it in different ways. So they can check for things like syntax errors, or if your JavaScript code is not valid, it will highlight such errors. So once you've got your JavaScript file populated, or you've got some code on it, it is there behind the scene constantly scanning your JavaScript file for any errors, and it will highlight them in the error window within brackets. If you are a beginner programmer in JavaScript, using linting tools will help you become a better programmer, because it will help you catch a lot of common mistakes that will help you improve on your JavaScript code. If you're using brackets, you'll notice there will be an error screen here, and normally you will have a warning. So this warning basically will show you any errors you have, or warnings. Warnings does not prevent your code from running. It will still run. It just highlights there are certain things that you could improve on. It doesn't necessarily, it's not a showstopper. It will not prevent your code from working, but it will help make your code more elegant. So you can see here, my ESLint has identified a problem with my JavaScript code. It's telling me here, it tells me line 1, which is this line 1 here. It's telling me there's an error that the document is not defined. Basically, what that means is that this document here has not been treated as a global object. So it thinks this document is a local variable. So with a global variable, you can access it from anywhere within the file. So it's thinking, JSLint is thinking that this document is not defined. So the way around it is to make this a global object so that it can be accessed from anywhere within this page or document. So the way we do that, we just put a comment, a JavaScript comment on the top of the file. And what we do, we just do slash and we do the word asterisk and just type in the word global, followed by the name of the document that is complaining about. We'll type document and we end it with an asterisk and then the slash. So that is a comment. If we save that, you can see the error has disappeared because it's now treating this document as a global object, which means it can be accessed from anywhere within the file. If you notice here, if you're using bracket, you can see here it says everything's okay, no problems found. So this is one place you need to check. If there's any errors or any warnings, it will be highlighted in this area here. You can turn it off, but I don't advise you do that so that you can capture any errors. But if you want to turn it off, go to the View tab and there's an option that says lint files unsaved. Just uncheck that, but I don't advise you to do that. It's good you see whatever errors is captured so that you learn. Hello and welcome to this video. I'll be introducing you to JavaScript events. What are JavaScript events? Events are basically things that happens to HTML elements. For interactivity to occur on a website, events needs to happen to create that interaction. An event can also be referred to as something that the web browser or the user does to create interactivity. So you can look at events as code structures that listen for things happening in the browser and then responding to that by running a code. So JavaScript will let you execute a code when an event is detected. An example of an event could be when you click on a button or when you fill out a form on a website. There are different types of events that can occur. The most obvious event example is known as a click event. Basically, this is fired by the web browser when you click on something with your mouse. So to demonstrate how this works, I've already entered some code in my console, inside my Google homepage console here. So got the document.query selector. The document.query selector returns the first element within the document that matches the specified selector. So here I've passed in the HTML as the specified selector, which is the entire document. This document here is known as the HTML. And next I have attached an onClick property. So after the selector I've put a dot and then onClick. OnClick property basically is going to return the click event handler for the current element. A handler basically is a function that is invoked or called by an event listener. An event listener is a kind of function that waits for an event to occur, then it responds with a code. It then executes some code in response to that event. So in here, in my document.query selector, I've selected the HTML document as a selector, so this is where the event is going to be executed on, and I've attached this onClick property. So, and next to that, I've set this to equals to a function. You can see I've got a function that's the opening curly braces, and this is the closing curly braces. When you define a function, you define it like this with parentheses. Parentheses can be empty if you've got nothing to pass in as arguments, and in between the curly braces will contain the block of code that will execute in response to an event. So here, the property here, this called onClick, will be the event. So what this is saying is that if I click anywhere inside this browser area, it will execute this code. Ouch, stop poking me. So if I press enter on that now, so it has now saved that. So if I click here, you can see it's saying ouch, stop poking me. So me clicking in that area is an event, and by clicking on it, it also runs or executes a corresponding code that responds to that event. So if I click again, it executes this code here, which is responding to the click event. Clicking is an event in the browser, so by me clicking, it executes this code, which is this code here. It says ouch, stop poking me. I'm just going to click to exit that. This is just one event I've illustrated. There are tons and tons of events that can happen within the browser, and you have to also define the corresponding code that will respond to that event. There are many ways to attach an event to an element. So here I've only used one, which I've attached the event to the HTML element, which is this actual page. And here I've also set the onClick handler property. This is a property. I've set that to equals to an anonymous function. If you notice, I've declared a function, but I didn't give the function a name. That is referred to as anonymous. So I've assigned that to a nameless function, which contains the code we want the click event to run. So this is the code I want the click event to run. When I click on the HTML, which is the browser here, it will execute that code. So this is just a very basic introduction to events. There are several tons of events that can happen in a browser, and you can also have corresponding code you want to execute in response to an event. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to add some more functionality to our example website now that we have explored a little bit about some JavaScript basics. So this is what the sample website looks like at the moment. So what I'm trying to achieve here is incorporate an image changer. At the moment, I've only got one image. I want to try and add another image so that when I click on this image here, it will change to another image. That's what I'm trying to achieve. So first of all, you need another image in your image folder. If you've only got the one image, make sure you add more. I've got a few images in my images folder here. Notice I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, but you only need another one just so that you can follow along with this example. So make sure you add another image to your images folder. You should have an images folder. So add another image. Make sure that the image is the same size. All the images has to be the same size if possible. I've already showed you earlier on in the course how to resize your images. So if you're not too sure, if you could refer to the video on that and just try and resize your images to be the same size. And once you've got the images, save it inside the same images folder. Any code you have in your JavaScript file at the moment, you can delete it. If you want to keep the one we've already done, it's up to you if you want to do that. But for me, I'm going to just delete what I currently have here. When you are using the brackets folder, anytime you make changes to your JavaScript file, it doesn't automatically reflect. As you can see here, you can see this dot next to the live preview is basically telling you you need to save whatever changes you've done. The only thing that basically changes automatically is your HTML and CSS. JavaScript, you have to save it first. And the way you identify that is by this little dot. So if I save this here, the title should change. I'm just going to click File and Save. You can see my title has now changed. I have added some bunch of code here to my JavaScript file. So I'm just going to explain the code to you line by line. If you notice here, we've got some errors here. JS lint has 10. These are not errors, they are warnings. So if it's yellow, it's warning. But if you notice here, I've got an error, which is saying document is not defined. This is basically because it doesn't recognize a document as a global variable. It thinks we're using something that's not being defined. So the way to get around that is just to put a comment. So you do a slash and the comment and just type in global followed by the word document and then an asterisk and then slash, and save that. Anytime you see a dot next to the live preview means you have to save the changes you've made before it takes effect. You can see now that error has disappeared, but we've still got some warnings which we will address later. Anytime you have warnings does not stop your code from running. It just means there are some problems that it wants you to address. So we'll address them later. Let me walk you through the code first. Line 1, we've already covered line 1. So we've put a comment here, and inside the comment we've put global document, which makes it possible to access this document from anywhere within this page or this file here. Line 3, I have defined a variable called dog image, and I've set that to equals to the document.query selector. We touched on query selector briefly when we're exploring JavaScript, and the selector here is the image. So this is the target. So I'm using the img stands for image. I'm using the img element as the selector. Line 5, I've created this dog image here, this variable called dog image. I've attached an onClick property to it, and I have set that to equals to an anonymous function. Anonymous function basically is a function that hasn't got a name. It's a nameless function, and inside the anonymous function I've got my opening curly brace and my closing curly brace. In between the curly braces is the block of code that will execute based on the condition. So I am storing the reference to my img element in my variable, in this variable called dog image. That's where I'm storing all the reference to anything that's called img. So any img element is stored in this dog image variable, and I have set this variable here. I have set this variable's onClick handler property. Okay, this onClick is a handler. I've set that to equals to this anonymous function. So every time that the element is clicked, so this is the element, which is the image, anytime the element is clicked, it will trigger the block of code inside it. So this is the condition it's checking for. On line 7 is saying if this variable called my images. On line 6 I defined another variable called my images, and I set that to equals to this dog image variable, and I attached a get attribute property to it, and the get attribute property I'm attaching to it is the source. Source basically means it will grab the image from the location you have stored it. Line 7, I'm saying if, notice I'm using triple equals to. When you use triple equals to, it will check the condition, both the in value and data type. So it's going to check if this variable called my images is strictly equals to the images, which is this images folder here I've got, /poppy.jpg, which is this current image. If it's equals to that, so I'm saying that if it's equals to that, if this condition matches, then I am changing the attribute on this dog image variable. So I'm saying if this condition is true, change the image to this image here. So if I click on this now, it should change the image. It says change the image because this first condition is true. It now changes, it swaps the images over. Now it's saying if it is not true, which is where the else conditional statement comes in, then change the variable again to this. So what it's saying is that if I click on this, then this condition in the if block is no longer true, then it will now execute this code. So if I click on this, it will return the original image. So that's basically how I'm changing the images from this block of code. Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be walking you through fixing the JS lint warning messages that were generated when we added an image changer to our JavaScript code. So these are the warnings. At the moment, we've got 10 JS lint problems. They're only warnings. Warnings do not prevent the code from working. They're just some warnings in terms of suggestions as to how to properly write your code. So it's basically not happy about the way I've written the code. So let's try and go through them. I've got 10 in total. So I'll start with here. It says line 5, which is here. It's saying expected exactly one space between the function and the parentheses. Okay, between the function and, so it's talking about here. It's telling me I should give a space. Alright, so I'll tab. Some people don't like writing functions like that. They like to have the parentheses close to the function. But I'm going to save that and see if that will disappear. I'll click save. Okay, it's happy with that. That has disappeared. So we've got 9 left. So on line 6 here is complaining that I'm missing a use strict statement. The strict statement basically helps prevent certain actions from being taken or thrown into error. So it tries to catch some common errors. So let's try and follow what it's complaining about. So line 6, I'm just going to come here and add the strict statement. So the way you do that is just do single quotes and you type in use space strict and you end it with a semicolon. All right, let's see if that solves it. So I'm going to save that. Okay, it's not happy about that. In fact, it's giving me more errors. So I've definitely done something wrong there. It's not happy about. All right, you can see here it's saying that it's expecting me to use this statement at column 5, not column 1. So if you look in my code editor, I've got it on line 6, column 13. So I need to shift it to column 5. So let's try and shift that to column 5. Alternatively, I can move it to a separate line on its own. Let's see if that works. So it's not happy because it's saying he expects it to be at column 5, not column 1. So let me move it to column 5. If you look down here, as I'm moving it, it tells you the column. So if I shift it, that's 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's save this, see if it's happy. All right, it's happy about that. So line 6, unexpected space. Okay, he's saying I've got some space. You can see here it says use strict. So there shouldn't be any spaces. So the spaces complain about, you can see where the mouse is, where the cursor is flashing. So I've tabbed to reduce that space. That's basically what's complaining about. So we now have 8 errors. Line 8 is saying expected exactly one space between if and. So line 8, so it expected one space between if here and the parentheses. All right, so that's a if. Let's do a space. Again, not everyone likes writing code this way, but this is what it's suggesting. So let me save that. Alright, so it seems to like that. So I've got 7 left. So let's go to the next one. Line 9, expected dog image at column 9, not column 7. Okay. Yeah, okay, so it should be at column 9, not 7. Okay. So let's move it. That's 8. You can see it says 8 there. So if I tab again, that's 9, because it's trying to create a proper indentation. So it's quite useful because it enables you to get into the habit of writing code properly. Alright, so we've done to 6. Line 9, unexpected space between set attribute and the parentheses. Line 9, set attribute, okay, unexpected space. So I'll just tab, reduce by 1. Let's save that. It's happy. 5 more. Missing space between and images. Line 9, between and, alright, between the quotes and the images. Okay, line 9, between the quotes and the images, it wants a space. It's really fussy, this guy. Okay, let's save that, see if he likes that. It does. Okay, we'll go 4 more. Line 11 is saying expected this variable to be at column 9, not 7. Okay, so line 11, let's tab. That's 8, 9. Because it makes sense, because it's trying to create proper indentation. If I save that, that's good. We're getting there. 3 left. Hello and welcome to the part 2 of fixing JS-linked warnings. So we initially had 10 errors showing up in our JS-linked console. We've got it down to 3. So on line 11 is complaining that there is an unexpected space between the set attribute and the parentheses. So this is what it's complaining about. So we just need to tab and reduce the space and then save that. Alright, so it's happy with that. Next is saying here missing space between the quotes and the image here. Okay, so it's missing a space between the quotes and the image, so it's expecting a space here. Okay, let's try that and see if it likes that. Click save all. Oh no, it doesn't like it. That's not what it means. Okay, let's try here. Do a space and do a save. Yep, that's what's complaining about. It wanted a space between here and there. So finally got it down to the last warning, line 13. So it's saying it's expecting a semicolon, but instead it's all that. So let's add a semicolon and see if he likes that. So it looks like it is happy with the semicolon. You can see here my console, error console is clean. You can see it says no problem found, good job. So once you see this green tick, it means your code is okay. Linting tools are very useful because they help you become a better programmer. It makes you structure your code in such a way that it's easier to read and understand. So following the warnings that the JS link provided, you can see that the code is in a much better structure than it was prior to the changes that are made following the advice from the JS lint tool. So anytime you're writing JavaScript code, always look out for the warning errors here, and if there are any, just try as much as possible to just follow the suggestion or what it's complaining about. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much. Bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be showing you how to add a personalized welcome message to your website. So this is what the website looks like at the moment. So the goal here is that when someone first visits the website, we want there to be a prompt where it will ask the user for their name. Once they enter their name, it will then say, rather than saying hello world, it will say hello world followed by the name of the person who entered their name. The first thing we want to do is go into our index.html file, and I'm going to add a button. So the button eventually, when I program it, will enable a user to change the name that is displayed on the welcome greeting. So if you scroll down to the bottom of your HTML file, just before the script tag, here, after the paragraph tag, if you just enter a button, the reason the script has to be at the bottom is to enable all the other content to load before any script is executed, so that there is no interference. So here I'm just going to tab and create a button. The way you create a button, you do a less than sign, type in button, and a greater than sign, and then just type in the text you want to show in the button. I'll just say change name. Alright, so that will be what will appear on the button, and then you save that, click save. You can see it has appeared here. With this live preview, any changes you make, if it's HTML and CSS, it appears instantly, but if it's JavaScript, you'll have to save it first before it reflects on the page. I have added some more JavaScript code. I started by modifying line 1 of the code. The global comment, I have included inside the global comment a window object and a local storage API reference, so they will be available anywhere in the JavaScript file. Without including them in the global statement above the document, it will not be available throughout the file. It will create errors. The window inside the global comment on line 1 basically refers to a window object. All web browsers support the window object. The window object represents the browser's window, and all global JavaScript objects, functions, and variables automatically becomes members of the window object. I've also added the local storage. Local storage allows you to save a tiny piece of data inside the web browser while the session is opened, and also will retain that data even when you close the web browser and reopen it later at a later stage. I added a comment on line 3 to indicate the code I used for the image changer. The rest of the code I have added was from line 17 to line 37. So these are the new block of code from line 17 to 37. Line 17 is just a comment to indicate where the code for the welcome message starts from. Line 19 is a variable that will store any references to the button element I created earlier in my HTML file. Line 20 is another variable that will store any references to the H1 heading element. Line 22, I have created a function called setUserName. All functions should have parentheses. The parentheses can be empty, or you can pass in arguments into the parentheses. And also functions should also have an opening and closing curly braces. So this is my opening curly braces and that is my closing for this function. So everything, all the code within this block here will be executed when the function is called. Line 23, I have specified a strict mode inside the function. Strict mode basically is a way to introduce better error checking into your code so you can catch any errors. The function contains a prompt. So I've got a prompt here. I've used window because the prompt is a member of the window object which I defined here. So I'm referencing, I have to put a window before the prompt in order to call it to work. So here I've created a variable called my name and I've set that to the windows.prompt, and here is the message that will pop up when the visitor gets the prompt. The prompt is a dialog box. It's a bit like an alert box, but the prompt will ask a user to enter some data, and then it will store the data in this variable I've created called my name. So when the prompt comes up, it will prompt the user, say please enter your name. Once the user enters the name and once they press OK at the dialog box, it will then store that name they've entered in here. It will store it in this variable called my name. Next, on line 25 here, I'm making a reference call to the local storage. Local storage is an API. API stands for Application Programming Interface. The local storage is going to allow us to store the data in the browser and later retrieve that data. So the name that the user gets from the prompt, that prompt is stored in this variable, and that variable will store it inside this local storage, which is located inside the web browser. Okay, and we're using the set item here, the set item function, which is this one here, to create and store a data item called name, and we're setting its value to the my name variable, which is this variable here. The my name variable will contain the data the user would have entered from the prompt. Finally, here we've got the text content of the heading. So it's going to change. So once the user stores the name inside the local storage, the H1 heading title will then change to say have a nice day. plus whatever name the user has entered. This my name here refers to this variable here. So whatever variable or name the user entered from this prompt will be displayed here. You can see my example here. I've got my name here. It says, "Have a nice day, Rick." So once you've entered the name, it changes the title of the H1 tag to "Have a nice day" plus whatever name you've entered in the prompt. Next, I've got an if block here. So we can see we've got some conditional statement on line 28 to 30 here. We've got the if block. So I'm checking some conditions here. So I'm saying if this local storage, if it is not, this exclamation means not. If the local storage is not, doesn't have any details, that if there's nothing stored in the local storage, we're telling it to set the username. So it's going to call this function here and set the name. So basically it's checking if the data exists. And if the data does not exist, we're using the set username function, and that function will be called and it will then execute and create the name. So that's the condition there. So it's saying if it is not set, it will set it. If it is already set, if it exists, the user, that is, if the user has already set it during a previous visit, we will then retrieve the stored name using the get item. We're now going to retrieve, if the name has already been stored, we're going to retrieve it using this get item function, and we're passing the name here, whatever name was stored. We're going to retrieve that from the browser and then display the heading. We're going to change the title to this to say "Have a nice day" plus whatever name that was stored in the web browser. Finally, here at the bottom here from line 34, this block of code here from 34 to 37 is referring to this button here. This button you can see here, the change name button. So basically what I'm doing here is that I'm attaching an on-click event handler. This is the on-click event handler. I'm attaching that to this button here. So when the button is clicked, the set username function is run. So if I click on this button now, it will call this function and prompt me for a name. So let me do that so that you can see it in action. Let me bring this here a bit. So if I click change name, it will give me a prompt. So if I change it to say John and say okay, it will now say, if I browse, you can say "Have a nice day, John." So that's basically how that button works. This button here. So if you want to change the name that is displayed here, you just click on this and it will trigger. Once you click on this, that's known as an event. If you click on this, it will trigger this function, and this function will call this, it will call this here, this set username, which is this function here, and it will trigger the whole process again. It will check if you've got the name saved in the browser storage. If it's not saved, then it will create it. So that's basically why the if and else statement is there. If it's there, if it doesn't exist, it will create it using the set username function. If it does exist, it will retrieve it using the get item method. Method and function, they kind of like work in the same way. So you may have heard me use function or method. I mean the same thing. So the website is basically finished. So the way this is going to work is that when a visitor first visits this page, it will ask them, it will prompt them for a name. It will ask you for your username. When you enter a username, it will then personalize the message. You just say, have a nice day, John, or whatever name you have entered. But you can also change it by clicking on this button here, which will trigger the event, and it will set this block of code in motion. One good thing about the local storage is that even when you close the web browser and you reopen it, for example, now I've stored the name John. If I close my web browser and reopen it, it will still retain that name. So let me close my web browser and I'll show you what I mean. I'll exit this page. I'll launch it again, and it should still retain the name John that was saved. You can see it's still got John saved. So that's possible because of the local storage facility in the web browser. Also, make sure your code is well indented, exactly the way I've done mine, so that you don't see any unexpected JS lint errors. You should have this green tick, which indicates that everything is okay with your code. So that's basically it for our sample test website project. So you should have a website looking like this. You should be able to click on your image and it should change, and this button also should change. When you click on it, it should prompt you to change or to add a name. Okay, the reason it's called null here is because I didn't enter a name. So if I enter a name, so let's say call it Tony. You see, it says have a nice day, Tony. So the next time I relaunch the web browser, it will still have that name saved until I change it. So that's basically it. Thank you for watching, and bye for now. Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be introducing you to JavaScript comments. Just like in HTML and CSS, you can also add comments in your JavaScript code. So this is the files we've been working on so far on the course. This is my JavaScript file. You can see it's called myscript.js, and there are two types of comments in JavaScript. You've got the single line comments and we've got the multiple line comments. I'll start with the single line comments. So for example, I've got this code here on line 1. If I want to comment that line of code out, all I need to do is do 2 slashes, and that will take that comment out. It should comment out that line of code. So you can see, because I've commented out that line of code, it has affected the text here that's been displayed. All right, so that is known as a single line comment. Comments are useful. You can use them to troubleshoot different aspects of your code, and more importantly, you can use them to document what's going on in your code. So that is a single line comment. If you want to comment out multiple lines at the same time, that is called a multiple line comment. So for example, what I could do if I wanted to comment this entire code out for all these 2 lines, you do a slash and then an asterisk, and then you do a asterisk and a slash. So that comments out everything on the code. If I save that, so you can see the whole code has been commented out. So this is known as a multiple line comment. So if you want to comment out multiple lines, this is how you would do it. You use the slash, asterisk, then asterisk, slash. That comments out everything within the opening slash and then this closing slash and the asterisk. So these are the two main types of comments: a single line comment, which is represented by 2 slashes on a single line, and a multiple line comment. I strongly encourage you to get into the habit of using comments to comment your code, especially. So when you write code, always try to comment it, or comment the areas you are likely to forget in future, so that when someone else looks at your code, or when you come back later to look at your code, it makes sense to you because you've left a comment. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.